Welcome to Aberdeen, the Granite City. Even at its most picturesque, it's more renowned for being grey than for being green. And with local authorities cutting costs across the board, the green spaces it has are increasingly under threat. This is Sunnybank Park. For generations, this was a bowling green, a small green oasis nestled between the city centre and the University of Aberdeen, where local residents could get away from the tarmac, stone and traffic. But over the years, the site gradually fell into disrepair, with the final blow coming in November 2009 when the bowling pavilion was burned to the ground. Aberdeen City Council announced that they were mothballing the site, withdrawing the already light touch maintenance. The future of the park was uncertain. As a designated green space, the chances of it being paved over for development were slim, but it was barely in use and becoming an increasingly run-down and dilapidated eyesore. It became a target for vandals and graffiti artists. Something needed to be done. Step forward, the Friends of Sunnybank Park.
There was a couple of local community members who were aware that council services had been withdrawn from the site. I can't explain why they were withdrawn. It could be the old cycle of if you don't look after a site, the services go down, or the people that use it go down, and then you have a reason to close, or whether it's simply that there's a regional sports centre around the corner and that the need was no longer there. Anyway, that aside, the facilities were closed, and the council was considering what to do with the site. So it came under risk of development. The local community heard about this, raised their concerns, and then Old Aberdeen Community Council asked the community what they wanted done with the site. The community came back very strongly that they wanted the site protected, kept as an open space for community use. So the Friends of Sunnybank Park was set up as a group to develop plans, find funding, etc. for the site.
The area was a St Macher outdoor centre with bowling greens, the court area and a pavilion. The council reviewed its outdoor provision and there were a number of centres that were receiving a very, very low number of visitors. They were expensive to maintain, and as part of the budget process 2 or 3 years ago, the decision was taken to close 3 of those outdoor centres, and the St Macher Centre was one of those. There were no firm plans for the area at that point. It is part of the Green Space Network, so development would have been unlikely. A group of local people banded together and came to the council with a proposal to create a new public park within the city, which the council was delighted to support.
The group spent a full year in negotiations, putting together a business plan and building partnerships with local enterprise and green organisations. In February 2011, they finally took over a 5-year lease of the park from the council. And while it had major changes in mind, there was also a clear desire to keep things the same.
It's, for some people, it's history. You know, that I've met a lot of the older folk in here who said, "Oh, I remember when I was a kid. You know, my dad used to bowl here, and then I came bowling here, or we walked our dog here." This space has always been an open space. If you look at the maps that date back hundreds of years, this used to be part of the Powys estate, the gates of which are just in the university. So history is a big thing. This area suffers from a lack of public open space. So I guess one of the major aims is to retain a valued and valuable open space for the local communities.
The importance of green spaces in a built-up city like Aberdeen can't be overestimated. I spoke to Dr. Louise Reid of the University of St Andrews, who worked as a research scientist in Aberdeen investigating the link between parks and public health.
There's a massive amount of literature which has tried to explore the relationship between health and different types of health, so physical health and mental health, and nature. And actually a lot of the research suggests that there is a strong correlation between people having improved health, recovery from illness, reducing levels of stress, mental fatigue, and experience with nature. So there's a lot of evidence that suggests the more nature you have, the closer to you, the better your health generally. And there's some evidence that came out a couple of years ago which suggests that even if people don't use a park, the knowledge that it's close by actually helps them. They report higher levels of life satisfaction. So even if you don't use nature or use a park, knowing that it's nearby and that you could use it helps to improve your sort of life satisfaction. And one of the original studies which kicked off a lot of the research into green space and health was a study that took place in the hospital, and they looked at recovery time from illness, and your recovery time was quicker if you had a view of a tree out your hospital window. So it might not necessarily be going to parks and doing things in parks, although there is a lot of evidence that that's good for you, but being able to see that out of a window or to know that it's close by is actually good for people's well-being and their mental health. So they are important even in an urban environment, even if you can't get to it, just to know that it's there.
One of the aims of the Sunnybank project was to bring the community back into the park. The gradual decline of the site had alienated a lot of local people, with instances of fire raising and graffiti prompting them to stay away, negating the positive effects the park could have on the community. The Friends moved to re-establish community allotments in the park to encourage local people to return to the park on a regular basis. Just a month after signing the lease, this was already well underway.
This month we've had the fencing going in, so here, allotment fencing. We've had a contractor in for a few weeks putting this in. This is part of the project that had to be done by the end of March. We got funding from the Climate Challenge Fund to put this in, so we've been working very hard to our uber fast deadline, and as you can see it's in. It's green, which is a massive bonus because it's less intrusive. And clearly it still needs a lot of work. There's a lot of mess around it still. All of the infrastructure for the allotments is yet to go in. There's some soil piles and container at the back there which is going to be used for putting in the raised beds. So I guess this is one of the biggest infrastructure projects that's gone in the park and will go in the park. And that, maybe a few people have been a bit like, oh, what's that that's appeared? But I think on the whole the reaction's been positive because it's green and it fits.
Weekly volunteering sessions held at BTCV Scotland also brought people into the park on a more regular basis, picking litter, clearing debris, making the park a more hospitable place for wildlife come spring.
We're launching a BTCV Green Shum today, and that's a scheme which should improve the environment and your health at the same time. So basically it's encouraging people to come along, volunteering, do some hands-on activities outdoors, and meet new people, learn new skills, get fit and healthy, and improve the local environment for the community as well. Today we're cutting all the hedges back and building habitat piles for hedgehogs and birds and bird nesting places. Just because, well, we have to give priority to this task just because the bird nesting season starts soon, bird breeding season, so yeah.
BTCV is one of several groups the Friends have established partnerships with. Aberdeen Green Space Trust committed a considerable amount of time and money to the park, taking responsibility for many of the physical changes planned.
We think Sunnybank Park's a brilliant idea of the local people coming together and actually taking over a park. What we try to do in our projects is work with the community, so we rely on the community coming together and delivering what the community want rather than what the local council or other people want. So in this case it's a true example of a community coming together and delivering something that they want. The response has been really good, yeah. So I mean, there's a small number of people that are taking it forward, but yeah, the support from the community is really good. And this area has very little green space in total, so I mean, this area is very, very important for people.
I mean, to actually come here and see the park and the state that it's in, and know what the park could be like, I think is a great thing, and then hopefully the group can see that, and we can see that. So, we're predicting about £60,000 towards this project at Sunnybank, and most of that involves tarmacking the entrance down from the main road down here. Our own volunteer group will be spending something like 300 man days actually here, doing putting in new fences, new gates, new boardwalks. So hopefully once that's been done and the work done by BTCV is completed, then hopefully by the end of this year, hopefully you'll see a huge improvement.
There has also been some political interest in the park. Former City Council leader John Stewart, whose George Street ward borders on the park, has been an active supporter of the project, and North East Scotland MSP Lewis MacDonald has also visited the site. The government is increasingly looking to community and volunteer groups to take responsibility for green spaces and other public services during a period of economic belt tightening, and Sunnybank seems to be the very definition of a big society project.
Clearly this was a situation where the City Council was no longer prepared to provide services, and the local community, rather than simply accepting that, stepped in and came up with an alternative, and that's why we see now something that really has great promise, and where already there are very good things going on, very exciting things going on, and I think a lot more to come.
So do you think people might see this as sort of a big society kind of move?
It's exactly a big society sort of move. I think there's been a lot of trouble in defining the big society. Part of the reason I think the principles behind big society are fundamentally liberal principles, and they've been promoted by a Conservative Prime Minister. And I think part of the communication problem has been that it sounds like a good idea, but there's a fundamental mismatch between what big society means and the philosophy behind the party that's promoting it.
The idea of a community taking the place of a public authority can be very successful, but it shouldn't be seen as an end in itself. In other words, the folk here would not have chosen to be doing what they're doing. It's fantastic they've been able to take advantage of the opportunity, but frankly many people around here would have rather see the continuing of the facilities that were previously provided here by the council. So if by big society you mean government washing its hands and walking away from its responsibilities, then clearly that's not something to be encouraged. On the other hand, the ability of communities to take advantage when those opportunities arise, and that is the best option, I think Sunnybank Park proves it can be done.
People from across Aberdeen will see this as a great example of what communities can do when they're pulled together. We're all facing tough financial times. There are further hard decisions to be taken by Aberdeen City Council, like all councils across Scotland, and we will need the support of local people and local communities if we're to ensure that spaces like this reach their potential, that services are to continue. Volunteering is going to become more and more important, and it can be a hugely rewarding experience to be involved in a successful project, and a number of other benefits for people volunteering and supporting projects in this way.
Here, the community have taken the bit between their teeth and are pressing ahead to do the things they want to do, but they're only able to do that in real terms with partnerships. They have partnerships with BTCV, they have partnerships with Green Space, and it's important that the council, as the landlord, is an active partner as well. And so I think that's what I would ask the councils to do, not to take over again, not to be setting the pace, but to recognise that the community here are making an investment on their part, which is to the benefit of the city and therefore of all the people that the City Council exists to serve, and that the council should reciprocate that by giving active support as a landlord and as a partner to the things that the community are trying to do. Now, what I've seen and heard today suggests that some of that is happening, but also I think that perhaps more is needed in order to get the maximum benefit for the local community and for the city from the investment that local people are making.
It's a serious point. I think there's a lot of doom and gloom talked at the moment over the spending cuts that are coming through, the impact that will have on council services, on NHS and other public services. But there are things people can do to ensure that activities continue to happen locally, that facilities continue to be available locally if they roll up their sleeves and decide to make a point of getting on with it. And that's exactly what's happened here, and I can see happening in other parts of Aberdeen in the years ahead.
I'm in this for the love of it. I'm in this because I'm a local resident, and I'm in this because I want to see the change. This is the kind of thing I do out in work, out of work. You know, it's my life's passion, I suppose. And I'm very keen to help support other local communities and for them to support us, local and national communities, to do this kind of thing. You know, these sites belong to them, and it's up to them to decide what happens in them, how it happens, who gets involved, etc. So anything we can do, to help, absolutely, I'll support that.
There's always going to be a place for large, well-maintained parks such as Seaton Park and Duffy Park and Hazelhead, but other areas, smaller areas within the community which receive light touch maintenance from the City Council, or areas like this where they had a function once as an outdoor sports centre, but which has usage has fallen away, then we'll look at alternative ways of ensuring that space can be available to people, managing that space and supporting local people to make the most of it.
My word of caution would be that the community here has had leadership, it's had resource, it's had stamina, and it's been able to take the opportunity and turn it to advantage. I know it's simply a fact that not every community would have been able to respond in such an effective way. And so I would not want to see the success of this community used as an excuse for public authorities to walk away from their responsibilities. And we've seen with community centres attempts really to close down community centres where the local management committee were not prepared to take liability for the centre. That's clearly not acceptable. So I don't think the Sunnybank Park model is one that should be applied willy-nilly across the board. But what I do think it shows is how effective a partnership approach can be, where the community have the resource to take the lead and where other bodies and other authorities come in behind them. And certainly I think that's a very good model and one that indeed does have wider application.
Location is key. Sunnybank sits in the heart of the northern side of the city, bordered by diverse communities in Old Aberdeen, George Street, Powys and the University of Aberdeen. Development at Sunnybank mirrored the completion of the new university library, the characteristic design of which dominates the horizon to the north, which has become a defining part of the city's skyline. And by May, progress is forging ahead of the park, with the allotments already in use and a network of paths being developed to provide better access to the area.
Probably the biggest thing is behind us in the middle of the park here. We've got the allotments started up. I think we had the fence just up last time, but now we've got the raised beds in, we've got the allotments all marked out and all allocated, and people have started getting their tatties and their cabbages in, and that's been great because it's really brought a lot more energy into the park, a lot more people coming down, doing stuff and enjoying it. The raised beds have been built out of larch because larch is naturally very durable, so we didn't really want to treat beds that people were going to be growing stuff in. So they were built by the BTCV volunteers and then filled with a mixture of composts from Aberdeenshire's municipal waste composting and soil, and we also took up the turf from the top of what used to be the bowling green around the raised beds. We put that into the raised beds and we've replaced that with dust, crusher dust, which creates a nice even surface for people getting in about the raised beds. Next step is to keep working on the paths, really. There's a few very steep bits of the paths where we're wanting to put steps in.
The steps here are part of the access, about an 80-metre path down, new path through the woodland. It gives people better access down from the medical centre down here, and just generally improved access. It just used to be a slippery soil bank before, so it's really improved the access a lot. It was mainly built by the Aberdeen Green Space Volunteer Group, but also we had help from the Shell Nelson platform. Came out and spent a day with 12 people doing the path and also doing the seats on the other side. So.
And we also had students from the SEC, crew from the state, who helped dig the drains. So they were here for a day.
But is Sunnybank a special case? There are certainly examples of other green spaces in the city falling into decline where the community haven't been able to step in, Victoria Park being one. For many years, Victoria Park featured greenhouses which were open to the community through the summer months and used to grow plants for the park and neighbouring Westburn Park. However, use of the greenhouses fell away, and earlier this year the council announced they were to be torn down after heavy snow broke a lot of the glass.
The use of the greenhouse here was to bring on plants which they used to bed out within the two parks between Westburn Park and Victoria Park over the years. Unfortunately, they don't do that anymore because I believe that they get them from the south. It's a lot cheaper and a lot quicker to get them up to Aberdeen. The council haven't had enough revenue to keep them in a good condition over the years. Unfortunately, now that they have absolutely no revenue at all, obviously the condition of the greenhouses is going to be that they'll have to come down for safety reasons.
The greenhouses were disused for a full 2 years before the council even moved to secure them.
It's disappointing that it's been this length of time, but it really comes down to the financial situation that the council finds itself in. Obviously, we have tight budgets, and there's competing demands on those budgets. And unfortunately, the removal of the glass houses has not been seen as a priority in recent years.
Greenhouses aren't the only issue at Victoria Park. Shrinking council budgets have hit maintenance costs across the board, from flower planting to tree trimming. And as it stands, the community have not stepped forward to help.
Well, if you just care to have a walk around the park, you will see what the condition of the park is in. The trees are in a terrible condition. They haven't been cut back. They are sprawled all over the place. Even the bush, the rhododendrons and that, they are dying off. There's very little ordinary summer flowers being bedded out, or even the winter flowers. The thing is, the general public do notice it, but the thing is, they're so busy with other things, they don't want to come along to the community council or any other committee that may be in the area to discuss what may be detrimental to the general public. There's one good thing that might be able to get people, the general public, interested in, if there was a park committee which could be formed, and they could come along to an evening to discuss what they would like to see done within the Victoria Park and the Westbourne Park. But the problem is to try and get the general public interested in it. Without the interest of the general public, it would never be able to survive.
Community involvement in a friends group seems to be more of a dream for Victoria Park, with few people willing to come forward and pitch in.
I think the danger that we've got is if we don't take some kind of action, then they become even in a more dilapidated state than they are at present. And I think that gives a bad impression to the public and people who are visiting the park, because they feel that we're not looking after the park. And it's been around for a very, very long time, and it's a beautiful park, and we should be, people should be able to go in and enjoy the park. So I think we do need to be looking at ways in which we can tackle the problems that we have in it at present.
Sunnybank is not alone in having friends though. Duthie Park, perhaps the city's most prominent green space, also has heavy community involvement through the Friends of Duthie Park group, but their efforts receive considerably more support from the council. Duthie Park is Aberdeen's showcase park, the park which is proudly displayed on road signs around town. The lawns are neatly trimmed and the flower beds planted out in intricate patterns with military precision. They even have a bandstand and an obelisk. The park is well used, not just by dog walkers and runners, but also visitors to the famed winter gardens, which are housed inside a large greenhouse complex on the site. This is perhaps why the park received over £5 million in funding from the Heritage Lottery Fund and the council this year, which is being spent on a number of renovations. So it seems that council funding is available, albeit with external support, for large green spaces in the city. The key appears to be the community working alongside local government and in partnership with interested charities and voluntary groups to achieve common goals. One of the first examples of this happening in a green space in Aberdeen was Manor Park.
Well, Manor Park's the oldest community park, as far as I know, in Aberdeen. The idea was first floated in 1999 when this whole area was quite derelict, of turning it into a community park. It was when the regeneration partnerships had just been set up, and there was a partnership covering this whole area called the Great Northern Partnership. They did a lot of surveys of what affected people's lives in these areas, and one thing that came up was a lack of good green space. Next, there was literally years of consultation and planning and fundraising and so on went on. I myself got involved through Friends of the Earth because we were looking for a place where we could do a community garden project. There was quite a partnership sort of got together, and went round, consulted different groups like church groups, youth groups, bingo, etc. Just asking what people would like to see in a park like this, and what the level of commitment was, and so on. And it wasn't till 2003 that we actually got started on the ground, having got all the funding together and all different people's ideas, and we're sort of taking it from there. It runs on a bit of a shoestring, to be honest. We get some funding every year from the Fair of Scotland Fund, which has been invaluable to fund our core costs, get the grass cut and whatnot. There's then all the volunteer labour that goes into it, both to run the organisation and do applications and so on, and to do work on the ground, doing all the planting and the weeding and so on. And then we get grants from different funds to do different pieces of work, like the climbing frame you see over there, different bits of planting, path work, etc. That tends to be a particular fund will come up funding a particular thing. People help out in different sort of ways. We've got about a dozen people who are park rangers, who basically just keep an eye on the place, and if there's any project problems, they'll phone it in, let me know. Then there's maybe half a dozen people who come to volunteer days. We have a regular one at the end of the month. There's another half a dozen people on the board and doing the more kind of technical side of keeping the organisation going that's needed to run a park. As we've found out with other parks in Aberdeen, that's as much effort, frankly, as doing the work on the ground.
As we saw earlier, Alan is also an active member of the Sunnybank project. So how has the experience of Manor Park helped develop that of Sunnybank?
I think part of it was just the idea that it could be done, that people were quite worried to begin with, both about taking on a project of that size and about the vandalism, because there was quite a lot of vandalism in Sunnybank when the community first took it on. And I was able to go and say, well, we do that in Manor Park. We manage to get insurance, we manage to run a charity, and we manage with the vandalism. And there was a bit of a feeling of, well, if you could do it in Logie, then you should be able to do it in Sunnybank.
Back at Sunnybank, work is forging ahead, and the attentions of the group have turned to the flooded wet area and sometime canoeing venue, fast becoming known as Sunnybank Lake.
This site has got a history of flooding. There's a Powys burn which runs behind the site adjacent to the university, and it was culverted, so I'm not sure what's gone wrong exactly. Perhaps just the drainage has been blocked. So there's a couple of manhole covers on the site here. We're going to look into those to see if we can get some of the drains cleared and help alleviate the flooding.
By September, the allotments are in full swing and there's a waiting list for plots. A new network of paths and stairs is opening up the park to visitors old and new, and the metal fences which once compartmentalised and restricted the space have been torn down. The changes that have taken place at Sunnybank are remarkable. In a matter of months, the park has gone from a run-down litter and vandal magnet to something that people really want to be part of. But in a way, that Sunnybank was always there. It just took a bit of hard work and community spirit to uncover it. And the best thing is that this is still only the beginning. As long as there are people willing to get involved, the Sunnybank Park project will never end.
Strangely, I've lived in the area for 10 or 11 years, and I never even knew this place existed. So I went to university just behind here. I've lived just across the street over there, and I thought I knew Aberdeen, and strangely, right on my own doorstep, there's this green oasis which I'd never even seen. So when I heard it was under threat, I came for a walk around and I was astonished, and I guess I immediately fell in love with it. You know, you can feel like you're in the middle of the country when actually you're in the middle of the city. So my heart was just in it straight away.